Hello, today we're going to be reviewing the present tense in Spanish. I'm assuming that if you are watching this video, that means you've already learned all of the separate present tense groups and we're just doing a recap, maybe at the start of Spanish 2 or 3 or 4. With that in mind, I'm going to keep the notes brief and I want to encourage you to pause anytime you need to write something down. All right, you ready? Here we go. We're going to start with regular AR verbs. So these would be verbs like hablar, escuchar, caminar, bailar, cantar, verbs like that. In the present tense, we have three separate sets of endings, one for AR, one for ER, and one for IR. So the AR verb endings are o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. Because it's an AR ending, the accent is on the A of the vosotros form. So for example, if we had the verb hablar, it'd be yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla, nosotros hablamos, vosotros habláis, and ellas hablan. Then we have regular ER verbs. These would be verbs like comer, beber, vender, barrer, correr. The endings for ER verbs are o, es, a, amos, eis, and ein. And because it's ER for the ending, the accent is on the E in the vosotros form. So for example, if we had the verb comer, you'd have yo como, tú comes, ella come, nosotros comemos, vosotros coméis, and ellos comen. For IR verbs like vivir, compartir, escribir, abrir, and decidir, the endings are o, es, a, but then unlike the ER, it's imos and is and ein for the endings. So for example, we would have yo vivo, tú vives, ella vive, nosotros vivimos, vosotros vivís, and ellos viven. Next, we're going to look at boot verbs. So our first group of boot verbs are O to UE boot verbs. That means that there's an O in the stem and it will change to a UE. Verbs in this group include costar, encontrar, dormir, almorzar, volver, envolver, and poder. A reminder of what this looks like, that stem change from O to UE will only be in the forms that make the shape of a boot. So the yo form, the tú form, the él, ella form, and the ellos, ellas, ustedes form. Outside of that, there will still be an O. So, for example, for volver, to return, we'd have yo vuelvo, tú vuelves, ella vuelve, nosotros volvemos, vosotros volvéis, and ellos vuelven. Next, we have E to IE boot verbs. There would be verbs like cerrar, entender, comenzar, pensar, preferir, and perder. Just like the other boot verbs, they're going to have a spelling change that only happens in the shape of a boot. So in the yo, tú, él, ella, usted, and ellos, ellas, ustedes forms, it'll change from an E to an IE. Outside of the boot, it stays with an E. For example, cerrar would be yo cierro, tú cierras, ella cierra, nosotros cerramos, vosotros cerráis, and ellos cierran. Okay, and then we have a shorter group, the E to I boot verbs. They would include verbs like servir, pedir, repetir, and competir. And again, the stem change only happens in the forms that feed into the boot. So for example, if we had pedir to order, we'd have yo pido, tú pides, ella pide, nosotros pedimos, vosotros pedís, and ellos piden. And finally, we have one U to UE boot verb, and that is jugar. So that would be juego, juegas, juega, jugamos, jugáis, and juegan. The next most common group of verbs are go verbs. So these are verbs that have a spelling change in the yo form, so the yo form ends in go. They include traer, salir, poner, caer, oír, hacer. We'll look at a couple more as well here. But here's an example. Traer would be yo traigo, tú traes, ella trae, nosotros traemos, vosotros traéis, and ellos traen. Then some of those go verbs are also stem changing. So for example, tener is a go verb, but it's also an E to IE shoe verb, meaning that the IE change doesn't go all the way up to the yo form. So we have tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, and tienen. Similarly, venir is a go verb and also an ida I issue verb. Vengo, vienes, viene. Venimos, venís, and vienen. Much like that, we have decir. Decir is a go verb. It's also an ida I boot verb. So the I goes all the way up to the yo form. Digo, dices, dice, decimos, decís, dicen. And then we have ver. Ver is irregular in the yo form. Veo. The rest of it's normal. Ves, ve, vemos, veis, and ven. It is missing the accent on the vosotros form. A lot of the shorter verbs have lost the vosotros accent over the years because if it's only one syllable, you don't need the accent there to know how to pronounce it. Another verb like that is ir, which is voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van. And again, no accent on the vosotros form because that's the only way to pronounce it. And dar, doy, das, da, damos, dais, dan, same idea, no accent on the vosotros form. Then we have two verbs that mean to be. Ser is soy, eres, es, somos, sois, and son. And estar is estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. I suspect you'll be reviewing ser versus estar in more depth later, but for now, ser is for permanent or long-lasting things, and estar is for temporary things like your feelings and emotions and locations. We also have two verbs that mean to know. Saber is to know a fact. The forms there are sé, sabes, sabe, sabemos, sabéis, and saben. And then conocer, to know a person, which is conozco, conoces, conoce, conocemos, conocéis, and conocen. So conocer is a SCO verb, and it might be the only SCO verb you've officially learned, but there are some other ones. For example, conducir, to drive, is conduzco, conduces, conduce, conducimos, conducís, conducen. And crecer, to grow, crezco, creces, crece, crecemos, crecéis, and crecen. We also have whole verbs, which are kind of the inverse of a car, gar, zar, if you've heard of those before. It's a GER verb that when you conjugate it in the yo form, if you just put GO, that make a SCO go, and we don't want that. We want escojo, so it turns into a J. So escojo, escoges, escoge, escogemos, escogéis, escogen, and dirijo, diriges, dirige, dirigimos, dirigís, and dirigen. Finally, two very strange verbs. We have haber, which means there is, there are, which is just I, and caber, which means to fit, which is capo, cabes, cabe, cabemos, cabéis, and caben.